Let me start recording the class. And let's finish what we started already. That was on Wednesday. Yes, was on Wednesday. Let me see where is it. Here it is. Here it is. Okay. Let me see where was the here. Yes. It was the last. No, this one. Yes. Okay. Yes. No, that one Wednesday. On Wednesday we were talking about the failures that happens in this kind of enterprise system. Failures. We were talking about different kind of failures. The free ride, where you avoid to pay taxes. Those are examples of market failure. And also there is another group of example of market failure, and they call it externalities. Another type of market failure occurs when economic transaction cause externalities. But what is externalities? Well, here it is. An externality is a side effect of a transaction that affects someone other than the producer or the buyer. A third party affects a third party, afecta a un tercero. Now, there are positive and negative externalities. Now, negative externality is an externality that is a negative effect or cost for people who were not involved in the original economic activity. Aquí hay un ejemplo. For example, a manufacturing company discharge pollution, material pollution that is going to pollute the river into a nearby river, and it's going to contaminate the river. The cost of the pollution are borne by everyone who lives by the river, even if they have no connection to the manufacturing company. So the result of this, by this company doing this action, is going to produce a negative externality. Now, the same thing is happening in David right now. Yesterday I was watching the news, and there's a group of fishermen who are complaining because agriculture is using fertilizer, and this fertilizer is affecting the river that goes by this area where he's producing rice. So this fertilizer is infecting or contaminating the river, and it's causing that all the fish are dying. And the fishermen, they live from those fish. So this is a problem that took place, and it's called a negative externality. So the government needs to be involved in order to give a solution for this fisherman over there in Chiriquí. That was a news that I heard yesterday. Now over here, there are other examples of negative externality: air pollution, noise pollution, industrial waste, a lot of waste that they don't know what to do with all this garbage o material que no se usa. So as there are negative, also there are positive externality. This is the meaning: when consuming or producing good causes a benefit to a third party. Example, walking to work reduce congestions. Quiere decir que el caminar, promueven el caminar al trabajo, o caminar produce que no haya tanta congestión en las vías de tránsito. Y eso ayuda de manera positiva al medio ambiente. A positive externality, in contrast, is an externality that is a positive effect or benefit to people who were not involved in the original economic activity. Another of your neighbor, for example, plants and maintains a beautiful rose garden. All the surrounding homes benefit from the beauty. Now, there's another example: spreading positive externalities. The government is the one who is involved in this action. It says, for example, positive externality are benefits that extend to people not involved in the original activity. And over here, there's an example. Let's pretend the government placed a new college in Nata, for instance, Nata, let's say Nata. or what other place could I say, like Coronado, no, in Anton, for instance, okay? Now, for example, it's a new college is built in your own town, in Anton, for example. Local businesses benefit from students' purchase of goods and services, definitely. Workers benefit too, for as businesses expand to meet students' wants, more and more jobs becomes available, of course. The community as a whole benefit from all the taxes collected from the students. The local government is able to spend some of these funds to provide more public goods. Now, it's the same like we did yesterday. Remember in the forum, I asked you whether to place a water park in that area. So you have to tell me whether it's beneficial or not. So it's the same thing. If you decide to build that water park, then it's gonna be a positive externality. Why? Because it's going to affect positively to the community. It's gonna create a lot of businesses, and also at the same time, you're going to collect a lot of taxes, like it says over here in this example, taxes collections. Okay, positive externality, the government will try to spread the benefit of a flu vaccine program. That's another example of positive externalities. Just as a government tends to limit negative externality, it's tried to increase positive externality. One way government does this is through subsidies, los subsidios. And what is a subsidy? It's a government payment that helps cover the cost of an economic activity that is considered to be in the public interest. Por ejemplo, aquí en Panamá se subsidia el tanque de gas. El tanque de gas, creo que el gobierno le paga 50, no, que como $25, y entonces por eso es que el tanque de gas está barato, está más o menos como 5 o 6 dólares, el tanquecito por lo menos, tanquecito de gas. Hay otro tipo de subsidio, el subsidio de que las becas universales, el ángel guardián, son tipos de subsidios que tratan de resolver todas estas market failures that are in this type of enterprise systems. Okay, so the government is essentially very important in order to solve this kind of problems. And over here, there are some different kind of subsidies over here, subsidies. Now, and also in this section of the book talks about the transfer payments, and it talks basically about the welfare. Have you ever heard about welfare in the United States? Well, that's a program that use it in order to help people who are not working for a long time, and they give them kind of a money in order to survive. So that's the welfare system. It's a program. And also, how does the government get that money from our taxes? So that's why it's very important to pay our taxes. Now over here, there's a chart that tells you how the millions and millions of taxes are put into work in different kind of sectors here in the government. For instance, the Medicare, food stamps, unemployed assistance, housing assistance, supplemental income. All these programs that the government helps you because of the market failure. So now over here, the last page of this book talks about they compare the amount of the taxes that is collected from the income that people gets. Now in Sweden, they collect the 28% of the whole income tax, and they put it into action in different sectors in the economy. Now in the United States, they only collect from the total income, they only collect 9.2%. So I think the United States are trying to make this percentage bigger, try to resemble or to be closer to what is happening in Sweden. Okay, I think we spoke like 2 classes or 3 classes ago about how is the system in Sweden. They pay a lot of taxes, but they have a lot of in return. Okay, now over here, I want to show you as a last activity, I want to show you the difference between positive and negative externality. Let's begin with this video over here that explains it very, very clear. Let's watch it, guys.
Voluntary exchange will only take place if both parties perceive that they're better off. Sometimes these exchanges result in spillovers. We call these spillovers externalities. If the spillover is beneficial, we call these positive externalities. If they're costly, we call them negative externalities. Let's talk about negative externalities for a minute. Imagine being a corn farmer and growing corn. What are the private costs that you face that help you determine how many ears of corn to grow? Things like fuel, seed, fertilizer. These are your private costs. But it turns out that every spring and summer, when you lay down the fertilizer, some of this flows into the stream nearby and flows into a lake downstream, oftentimes resulting in large fish kills. All those downstream, the fishermen, the recreationists, and the landowners, all incur a negative externality. There are 3 broad categories of ways in which we can address these externalities. The first is taxation, the second, regulation, and the third is by using property rights and the Coase theorem. Let's talk about these individually. First, taxation. The economist A.C. Pigou first suggested that we could impose a tax on the producer that would reduce the amount of production of whatever good is that's producing the negative externality. The benefit of this, of course, is that we would reduce the amount of negative externality being imposed downstream. However, the difficulty is monitoring. It's difficult to know exactly how much fertilizer is being laid out in our example, or how much pollution is being emitted from various point sources. And so the monitoring costs are quite high. The second way that we can address externalities is through regulation. There are many examples, let me name 2. One is through technology-specific methods. This is where the government requires producers to use a certain technology to reduce pollution or emissions. The benefit is that monitoring costs are quite low. You don't need to have somebody out there constantly monitoring the amount of emissions because you know that technology is present and working. The downside is that it reduces the incentive for firms to find innovative ways to further reduce their emissions. The second of these regulatory methods is by simply restricting the quantity produced, either of the output or of the pollution being produced through production. The benefit of this, of course, is that now firms have reason to find innovative ways to reduce the pollution. The difficulty is that the monitoring costs are quite high. The third broad way to address externalities is the property rights solution suggested by economist Ronald Coase. He said if property is well defined, divisible and defendable, and negotiation costs or transaction costs are low, simply by assigning the property right, we can overcome the externality. Well defined, divisible, and defendable. These are the 3 characteristics that you must have in order to have a fully functioning property rights solution. Well defined. What is the object over which the owner has rights? In what manner may this owner exercise his or her rights? Divisible. Are these rights separable? And can they be traded? Defendable. Are these rights enforceable? Are these rights recognized either via custom, by the community, or a third government agent? Let's go back to our example. Let's assign the property rights of the lake to the farmer. You may first imagine that the farmer doesn't change his or her behavior. However, now the fishermen and recreationists downstream can negotiate with the farmer to reduce the amount of fertilizer that he or she lays on the field. This reduces the amount of fish death downstream. We could also, conversely, assign the property rights to the fishermen, whom you may initially think would require the farmer to stop using fertilizer on the land. However, now the farmer has the incentive and the knowledge to negotiate with the fishermen downstream. The fishermen will allow some positive amount of fertilizer, but not as much as before. In each scenario, we come to a solution that internalizes the externality or overcomes it. The fisherman and the farmer now know the cost of the externality and are able to negotiate in order to overcome it. The benefit of this to other regulations is that the monitoring costs are very small. Not only that, there's an incentive for either the farmer or the fisherman to find ways to reduce the negative impact on social welfare. Coase theorem overcomes these monitoring costs by using local information that is not available to an agent determining the taxation or regulation.
So now let's watch this one. It's the last
Hi
one.
guys, and welcome to Cultnomics. My name is Paul Hanley, And today I'm going to be chatting to you about positive and negative externalities. An externality is the cost or benefit of one person's decision on the well-being of a bystander, which the decision maker does not take into account when making the decision. So a market interaction whereby it impacts on other individuals, but you don't take that into account in the cost or benefits. We're going to take the example of a negative externality initially, where we have a small local town where a factory sets up. This factory is a polluter in that it emits pollution from the production process, and it doesn't take this into account in its private costs. So what happens is, if there is a location nearby with houses and private residents, these residents will be affected by the pollution of the factory. So you have your disgruntled individual there. So the difference is the social cost is the extra cost to the individual in terms of pollution. The private cost is just solely to the factory itself. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if we had something called property rights, whereby the individual in question owned the rights to the air around them and could be compensated by the factory for them. But this doesn't necessarily happen all the time, in which case a negative externality leads to overproduction, so too much production in that case. For a positive externality, it's the opposite. In the case of a positive externality, for example, in this case here, education, what we have is again a disconnect between social and private, but in this case it's benefits. So the private benefit to education is that an individual being more educated is more likely to get a job and earn a higher income level. However, the social benefit is to the economy. And in this case, it tends to be underproduced as opposed to overproduced for a negative externality. And people will not finance it as much privately for the extra benefit. So what's the role of the government in all of this? Well, the role for the government really is to intervene in the market. In one, it could be a tax for a negative externality that reduces pollution in our case. It could be a subsidy in the case of education, where we subsidize students going to education, or it could be regulation, where we regulate the market itself. I hope you call back to cut.
Okay, guys, with this video, we conclude this session about governments and free enterprise questions. Do you have any questions, by the way? Questions? Questions? No questions. Very good. Okay, if you don't have any questions, then we conclude the class for today. See you next week. And be ready for your exam, Anabela Delgado. Get ready. Bye-bye. Corleone! Corleone!